Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the autumn edition of the Wimbledon Community Forum. Chris and I were speaking earlier today, and we did agree that we hope that this will be the last time that we have to do this. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I will begin the meeting, as I do all the meetings, by reminding you that it is your meeting, that it is for residents, and the purpose is for you to hold your elected representatives to account and to share any concerns, any ideas, any thoughts, and any questions that you might have. So please, as always, please do that. Unfortunately, because having a number of people involved, we're going to stick to the previous format and ask you to use the chat function to ask your questions, and Chris and I will pick up on those questions and give them to whoever is talking at the time. So this evening we are joined by, and these are only in the order in which I've seen people, so Councillor David Simpson of Hillside Ward, so north of the station broadly, Councillor Elena Stringer of Abbey Ward, so South Wimbledon area, and Councillor Simon McGrath of Dundonald Ward, so going down the Broadway from the station to the right-hand side, Councillor Daniel Holden, also of Hillside Ward, north of the station, and I think that's, oh, and I'm sorry, Councillor Ed Gretton of Wimbledon Park Ward.
We all know where Wimbledon Park is.
Yeah, Wimbledon Park, yes, everybody knows where Wimbledon Park is. So those are councillors so far present. Oh, I've seen now Councillor David Williams as well of Hillside Ward. So we've got all three councillors from the ward just north of the station. So we will jump into the meeting. You're all very welcome and thank you for attending. So we have, in terms of asking elected representatives to be accountable to all residents, we have, as you know, we have the Member of Parliament attend once a year to provide a report. And we have the Assembly member attend once a year to provide a report, and we have the Leader of the Council attending once a year to provide a report as well. And what we ask them to do is share with us a little bit about what is in their in tray, what they're working on, what issues they're facing, and what issues we as a community are facing. This evening, I'm very pleased to welcome Councillor Elena Stringer, who is the Deputy Leader of the Council, standing in for the Leader, and is also a member of the Council's Cabinet. But with a different hat on, Eleanor is also a regular attender at these meetings, so welcome, but also welcome back. Eleanor will speak a little bit about what's in her in tray and the issues that herself and her cabinet colleagues are grappling with at the moment. And then there will be an opportunity to raise concerns or ideas or questions after that. And please do use, just to remind you, please do use the group chat function to ask those questions, or raise any ideas or comments. So Eleanor, you're very welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you very much for having me here. So yeah, as James said, I'm here in place of the Leader of the Council, Councillor Mark Allison. He would normally very much be attending these and is attending the other community forums, but he has a more pressing engagement, which is he is a massive AFC Wimbledon fan, and he's at the match tonight between AFC Wimbledon and Arsenal kicking off in about 25 minutes. But for those who don't know Mark, he's been a councillor for nearly 20 years. He became Leader back in November, and at the same time myself and Councillor Owen Pritchard were elected as joint deputy leaders. As James said, I'm a cabinet member, so I have responsibility for children, young people, family and education issues right across the borough. But I am a Wimbledon councillor myself, so and I frequently attend these forums, so I'm very happy to be here. And I'm used to, as James said, kind of very much sitting back and hearing the resident views. So it feels unusual to be invited to be and speak at the front, in quotes. So I represent Abbey Ward, which goes from the kind of theatre in the west along to the Wandle in the east. My parents live just north of the ward. My daughter's in a nearby primary school. I love living here. I love how everything you need, from nature to noodles, culture to craft beer, it's all on your doorstep. And I love that we have a great sense of community. But I'm very aware that while it is a great community, there are huge challenges. We have residents living in high levels of deprivation, not just in other parts of the borough, but short walks away from the heart of Wimbledon. And the pandemic has hit many of those people and other people facing challenges such as poor health really, really hard. What I'm really passionate about is lifting the chances of those who need it the most and providing help to the most disadvantaged. And I think the council's done great work on this. There's made huge improvements. So in my area, for instance, every Merton secondary school has been rated good or outstanding, and therefore more and more pupils are staying on in Merton secondaries instead of leaving the borough, like many did up until a few years ago. As a council, we provide financial support to those in need so that the poorest households don't have to pay council tax. We've also, over the past year, been providing additional vouchers for our poorest families over holidays during the pandemic, sometimes with bits of government funding, but often having to top it up ourselves and fill that gap ourselves. A key aspect of improving the most disadvantaged people's lives has to be about housing. Families living in overcrowded accommodation have had some of the toughest times of all, both in terms of mental and physical health over the past 18 months. We have to deliver more housing to provide homes for these people. And we need to deliver more homes generally to address the affordability crisis. I'm one of the many people who grew up around here, but even on our 2 professional incomes have struggled to buy a house like the one that we rent from a private landlord because our parents don't have wealth to pass on to us. Thankfully, I'm personally in a great position, caring landlord, decent incomes, but many families and residents are living in very precarious states where the landlord might evict them at any moment, or where even a small drop in their income makes their housing unaffordable. So I hope that while no one here can disagree with the aims of providing more appropriate housing, I know that the reality of this, building more buildings, is a difficult topic to find agreement on, and I'm happy to discuss this further. I am proud of the thousands of homes that we have already provided and will fight on behalf of my residents, those I meet out knocking on doors, or those who come to me about their desperate circumstances, including, for example, just this weekend I met a mother living with 2 children in a 1-bedroom flat, one of which is disabled, and it's just not appropriate, and we need more homes for these families. Many of the achievements that I've spoken about might not apply to you if you don't have children, or if you aren't eligible for our council tax support fund, or aren't in desperate need of a new home, and I recognise that. And the council exists to serve everyone. That's why I'm also proud of our progress on other services like the new library down the road in Colliers Wood and the new leisure centre in Morden. And we as a council are absolutely passionate about being inclusive. Mark has a huge personal commitment to this, and he's made sure that he's appointed the most diverse and ambitious cabinet in Merton's 55-year history. So 2/3 of his cabinet members are women and more than half are from an ethnic minority. We have to work hard to celebrate our community in all its diversity. And one of the first announcements on Mark becoming leader and us becoming deputies was launching Merton Together. So we know that when the pandemic began, it was brilliant how people in our community wanted to help everyone and help all those who needed looking after because they were shielding or isolating or struggling. Mark himself and his wife set up a food bank, and locally in Wimbledon, we've had brilliant work of new initiatives like Don's Local Action Group and Merton Mutual Aid, as well as increased work for the long-standing groups like Wimbledon Food Bank. So Merton Together was a joint campaign with our partners to come together to support our residents, make it easier to get involved in your community. And I'd like to thank everyone who got involved. As well as being a difficult year, this has been a different year. Many things have not been normal, and things for some people will never be the same again. And I think that we as a council, working with NHS and other partners, have done a great job of keeping people safe. But as well as, of course, some people losing loved ones, many others have lost jobs or struggled in other ways. And others have got used to new ways of working, maybe more working from home and less going to the office. And for many, that has been a good thing. And it's certainly represented, as I say, a change in how people live their lives. And this has implications for us as a council. So that's why this summer we launched a huge listening exercise across the borough. It's called Your Merton because we wanted to listen to what you want from Merton, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, things you think we do well and things that you want to improve. And Your Merton has been the biggest consultation we've ever undertaken, with thousands of people telling us about how the pandemic has made them think. We're working through those responses at the moment and through those implications. But one thing that is coming through clearly is that people love Merton's community, and people love our parks, our open spaces, which council kept open and in good condition. And we're all spending more time around our homes than we did before. So we're much more conscious and aware of our local streets, both the good and the bad. But we're still very much in listening mode. So one example of us listening is in response to a recent consultation on moving towards having parking charges be linked to the emissions that a vehicle emits. We are committed to looking to ways to use our powers at our disposal to deliver on our commitment to address climate change and improve air quality. So last year we had, as a council, proposed a sliding scale of charges for parking, which would be dependent on the type of car you own and the proximity to public transport, as a way to encourage residents to drive less and consider alternatives. We ran a consultation on this proposal and we received a large number of responses and have been considering these carefully. So when we came in as a new leadership team, we realised that the context had changed. So we still have this commitment to addressing air quality and addressing climate change, but the context is just very much changed from when we initially proposed emissions-based charging, which was now a couple of years ago. The Merton residents have had a tough time during the pandemic. So we recognise that the increased charges would have impacted on residents who might have had a drop in their income due to furlough or being made redundant. And we also know that many families are now facing a cut to their universal credit or a hike in energy costs at the moment, as well as a forthcoming rise in national insurance contributions. And we as a council don't want to add to these burdens. There's also a positive reason for us to reconsider this. Even without increasing prices, there's already been a noticeable shift to lower polluting vehicles. So we have decided to kind of listen to the residents, consider the context, and we are kind of putting on hold those plans for emissions-based charging, and we won't be going ahead with them over the next few months as we had been hoping to initially. And this is because listening to residents is critical to us improving our borough. So while I love the place, I don't pretend that everything about Merton is perfect. Wimbledon in particular is a brilliant place, and if we were meeting in real life, as I hope we will be again soon, we'd be in that beautiful Wimbledon library building that's been here for over 130 years, next to one of the best pubs in the whole of London, the Alex, across the road from a thriving historic department store. I mean, what an amazing neighbourhood. But even in Wimbledon, not everything here is perfect. And while I think we've done amazing things to keep people safe, we've kept the parks open, kept the rubbish collected, made sure that our kids get a good education, that they get free school meals, even during the holidays when they're eligible. Certain things have been a challenge. And I think, as I was saying, just as people are more conscious of the good things in their area, you also become more aware of those that are less good or that bother you more. So we want to hear about that. We're also really proud of the way that Merton's come together in the pandemic. I'm proud of things like AFC Wimbledon, which has come back to SW19, back to the Borough of Merton. It's given a real lift to everyone. And I'm proud of the fans who set up the new Don's Local Action Group to help those who need it. What a great community we have in Wimbledon. So now we want to build on that. We want to make Merton even better. This won't be easy. And one of the things that we want to do is hear from you about what your priorities are and what you want. So thank you for inviting me, James. And I promise that we'll be doing our best to ensure that Merton remains a great place for families and residents and people like you all. Thank you very much.
Elena, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Non-councillors, please, as it's a meeting for residents. Any questions or comments on what Elena has told us this evening, and in particular, she's encouraged residents to use this opportunity to give any ideas that you might have or priorities that you might have. So there are no questions so far on the group chat. I am going to just pause for a moment to give people the opportunity to do that. And Chris, you're able to see if there's something on YouTube as well, is that right? So let me just pause for a moment. Unfortunately, the reality is that numbers have suffered a lot during COVID, and with us having to be online, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting back face to face, and we'll push the numbers back up. But final call for any questions or comments. Okay, please do still signal if you would like to speak, because it is your meeting. Oh, I've just had a no, that's from Councillor.
James, there is a question that was on YouTube that had been submitted during the day about the trust fund trees and if there's any update on that.
Sorry, say it again, Chris. Sorry, if on the
trust forward on Hayden's Park.
The trees at Plough Lane at Trust Forward outside the full building. I am not up to date from that, so I'm not going to try and make up an answer, but I can commit to go and get one for the resident if they want to drop me an email.
Thank you, Eleanor. Simon, you had a question to put. I just would like to point out that I know you know this, but it is a meeting for residents, and we had the council meeting only last week, and Eleanor has very clearly spoken as deputy leader of the council and not of her group. So I hope that your comment or question isn't going to be very political, as we only had council last week, but go ahead.
Well, this is very much something we didn't know about at council last week, and in fact, as councillors, we still haven't been told about, so I'm sure that will count, which is the decision to put on hold, I think was the phrase used, the increase in parking charges for polluting vehicles. I wonder if Councillor Stringer could just confirm, is the increase that whereby people in Wimbledon and Rains Park are paying an awful lot more than people in Mitcham, is that still going ahead? And when she says put on hold, can she give us any idea when that's going to be reviewed? Would that possibly be after the local elections?
No. So this is not a kind of short-term review. This is a kind of halting this, and we'll see if there's other things that we can do about emissions. But we're kind of halting the current plans for charging. When you said about the change, do you mean? So there's the changes that have already gone through. So no, anything that we were consulting on that depended on the emissions-based element. But the whole proposal depended on a combination of the locality, the emissions-based element, and the kind of age of the vehicle. That's all on hold.
Okay, thank you.
If that's again probably the wrong phrase, I think halted is the more accurate phrase.
Okay, thank you.
So and the ones that have already been agreed and have gone through, I think are already kind of in train.
So the ones that charge people,
nothing new coming through in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so some questions. Oh, sorry, Simon, have you finished?
I have finished, thank you.
Thank you. Eleanor, questions coming through now from residents. Are there any plans for the council to build additional council housing? Obviously, there have been quite a lot of legislative changes over the years, but are you able to comment on plans for additional housing? Yeah,
I will comment. So we're not, as a local authority, we don't own any council housing because there was a stock transfer made of all social housing to a housing association I think it was 10 years ago. So what we are keen to build is more social homes, and the kind of regeneration that's currently underway of 3 big estates in my ward, High Path, Eastfields and Ravensbury. That is kind of being re-looked at the moment, and one of the aims there is to see if we can indeed deliver more social houses for our most vulnerable residents.
Thank you, and then thank you very much. And then another question that's come through, which I'll read out. Dundonald area is a family area with 2 primary schools. The children's playground could do with some updating. Is that, I mean, I appreciate that's it's important, but it's also very specific. So it may be something that you want to come back on. But
I'm really happy to look at that and to either visit it myself or go with the cabinet member responsible and see if we can make the case for any further investment in that.
Okay, thank you.
It's a brilliant playground. I love the playground there. My daughter loves it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from and thank you for your thank you. So you were thanked for the last one, Eleanor. Any other questions or comments from residents to Eleanor?
Okay, so there's the comments about the kind of breaking news of the changes to the parking charges. Yeah, so at the moment, I think it has to go through some formal decision-making machinery, but we're announcing it today. I understand that a press release has gone out today, and then obviously everything else will be updated in due course.
Okay, and you were referring to that last point about emission-based charging. Yes?
Question about how there's still something on the website still about the emissions-based charging area. So yeah, obviously It won't be instantaneous given it's only been announced in the past.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments from non-councillors? Okay. At risk of making myself unpopular with my own group, I have always said that the purpose of tonight of the community forum is for residents. It's not for councillors to debate amongst themselves, even more so when we had full council only last week, and even more so when the matter being brought up was actually on the agenda. So particularly given that it involves large areas of confidentiality. Elena, you may want to comment on what Councillor Gretton has said, but it was debated last week, and it is on. It was given to us as on confidential paper. So I'll leave it to you if you want to comment. But my own view is that the proper place for dealing that is in the council chamber, and it was dealt with there.
Apology, I'm missing what is it meant to be commenting on?
So you've been asked, one of the questions that has been asked is whether you have any, given that you have talked about housing, whether you have any comments to make on the proposed regeneration of the High Path estate, the fact that more homes are going to be available there, and that there have been contractual changes there.
Yeah, there are contractual changes. I'm not going to go into the detail of that because I definitely don't want to reveal any confidential information. I represent one of those estates affected, so I'm happy to quickly comment on that if that's okay. So as I said, like, we have people on Clarion houses in desperate need of new houses. We have a current ongoing issue with repairs, where we have lots of residents needing repairs, and we're working closely with Clarion to try and hold them to account on that and make sure that those repairs are done. But these are just, but if you've been to visit any of these properties, you'll know that that's not what really needs to happen. What needs to happen is they need to be pulled down, they need to be rebuilt. So I recognise that the situation has changed since that industrial model was done, and that we as a council have a duty to deliver on the housing targets and on, as has been mentioned, the kind of social housing targets and affordable housing targets that we want to deliver. So I'm pleased that we are trying to find a way to push ahead with the regeneration work across those 3 estates.
Thank you. This is the last political question I'm putting, and I'm not going to take any more for the reasons I've already said. But I'm also seeing a question, Eleanor, on the council's property company, and whether you're able to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, quite bluntly, not because it kind of came into existence and then kind of almost ceased existence kind of about the time that I was joining cabinet. But at one point I would say is that the council property company wasn't about delivering social homes. This was about trying to develop, build more homes, but do so as a kind of private landlord. And when we looked into it, we realised, the decision was taken that isn't an avenue that the council should be going down. But yeah, I'm not going to comment any more than that.
Okay, thank you. That was the last political question I'm putting. Are there any other residents' questions before we move on? Questions, comments, ideas? Eleanor, thank you very much for coming to see us this evening. Thank you for joining us. I mean, I say thank you for joining us, but obviously you're a regular attender anyway. So thank you, and thank you also that you have said that you will try to hang on and just listen to the open forum as well. I'm very grateful for that, and there may or may not be things that come up there that you're able to assist with. So let's move on. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Navdeep Alj, who is joining us to talk about local cancer services. There have been concerns raised with the council from quite a number of residents regarding cancer services, given the effects that COVID have had on all of us. And so Dr. Alj, who I don't know whether he still is, but the last time I saw him, he was still wearing his doctor's uniform. So I'm very grateful. He still is, I think. But I'm very grateful to you for joining us this evening. And Dr. Alj, what we'll do is that we've got some people on Zoom and some people on YouTube, but if you just take us through your presentation in your own time, and then at the end there may well be questions or comments which we will pick up from the group chat, and I will then put those to you. But Dr. Alj, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, great. So yeah, I got time just to get home on time and just sort of log in on my laptop, so that's great. So I'm Dr. Agha. I'm a GP in Merton in Rains Park, but I also have some dual roles. I'm the cancer lead for the Borough of Merton as part of the South West London CCG, and I'm also a Macmillan GP. So I represent Macmillan, the charity. And if you just go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to take a little bit of your time, just 10-15 minutes, to mainly give an outline, of a very sort of brief outline of the current cancer catch-up program that is underway in Southwest London, and also focusing on Merton, obviously. There's a lot of details, so I'm going to focus on quite a high-level review and focus on specific cancers where there's more concerns for, and what sort of things are in place to try and help with that sort of cancer catch-up. So I'll go through the general outline of what's happening across Southwest London, and then honing on Merton, and then focus on urological cancers and talk a little bit about lung cancers, but also talk about the great things that are occurring in our community across the spectrum of healthcare, charity sector, voluntary sector, to help address this. And also, maybe if I've got some time, maybe talk about primary care networks, and this is sort of the big change that is occurring in general practice and how it affects cancer care overall. Next slide, please. So the pandemic has been obviously a shock to the system for the NHS. Clearly, some aspects of care were delayed and put on the back burner whilst hospitals were busy treating people who were essentially dying from coronavirus. And that was the correct decision to make at the time. There was an expected result that would occur of that there would be some degree of catch-up. And so a lot of the work that's gone on over the last 6 to 12 months has been on focusing on trying to catch up cancer diagnosis and hence care. If we look at this sort of very brief overview graph, and I don't want to go through everything in detail, but certain conditions, certain cancers have been affected more than others. If you look at the top 3, so urological cancers, when I say urological, that includes things related to prostate, bladder, were found to have the most significant drop in cancer detection during the pandemic. We also found that breast cancers were also diagnosed, much fewer diagnoses of breast cancer in Merton and Southwest London, mainly because of a massive backlog in screening. And also lung cancer in some areas of the borough, but mainly sort of in Wandsworth, really, there's significant delay in diagnosis of lung cancers. Next slide, please. So if we go through some of the data that we have, and this is all sort of available public health data, really, and we focus in on Merton compared to other areas. Really, actually quite reassuringly, Merton is not in such a bad place. Southwest London is treated as one. So Wandsworth, Sutton, Richmond, Merton, Kingston and Croydon all work together. And that change was implemented around a year or so. And so a lot of the data is analysed in comparison. And unfortunately, the London Borough of Merton has some catch up to do, but is not in such a dire state as other boroughs. So if we focus in on prostate and bladder cancer, the urological cancers, there are approximately 8% reduction in diagnosis of this, these cancers. And if you compare that to obviously some other boroughs, we're doing okay. Breast cancer, unfortunately, we are in keeping with a lot of other boroughs in that there is a delay. And unfortunately, there has been a bit of a backlog developed for screening services. And I will go into a bit more detail about how that is being tackled. And if we sort of think of the numbers in terms of real terms, the difference suggests that there could be, for example, 25 patients or women out there who may have very early breast cancer, which might have been detected if it wasn't for the pandemic and if it wasn't for the delays in the borough of Merton. And then focusing on lung cancer, which is more of a problem in certain other areas. Again, Merton, we're actually okay. Relatively speaking, there's 3 fewer patients with a diagnosis of lung cancer than there was before the pandemic. Next slide, please. So in terms of urological cancer, I won't go into this slide in great detail. It's actually more of a clinical slide, mainly aimed at clinicians and doctors. But the reason we think urological cancers have been diagnosed later is patients have had fewer routine blood tests. There's a specific blood test we call the PSA test, which is very good at diagnosing prostate cancer. Very opportunistic. We tend to do it GPs with other blood tests, and a lot of patients didn't want to attend hospitals or attend GP practices for fear of obviously coronavirus, and so there were fewer PSA tests done. So we think that may have caused some of that. And then bladder cancers, probably as a result of the way things have changed, fewer urine tests have been done on the ground, and sometimes that means that perhaps fewer diagnosis of blood in the urine, and then hence more investigations. But yeah, I won't go into every single detail on that slide. Next slide, please. Lung cancer, no, mainly a problem sort of in our neighbouring borough of Wandsworth. The important thing to emphasise and to keep it brief is that we should all be very much aware of the significant signs and symptoms of lung cancer. Persistent cough, blood in the sputum, unexplained weight loss, long-term smoking. These are the basic messages that we want to continue to portray, and I'll detail in the next slides how we've been portraying this message. Next slide, please. So this is a very technical slide, which I think I will skip over. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing to try and tackle this? I guess that's the priority, and I guess that's probably what you want to hear about. So Southwest London Ccg, which is the coordination centre for cancer care in the area, has been running a lot of campaigns on trying to raise awareness, and there's been a lot of digital campaigns as well as non-digital. Digital side of things went really well at the beginning of the pandemic. Social media, TV, YouTube, and has really been quite successful, and has really demonstrated a good way that we can use these sources to try and improve cancer awareness, and trying to get people to attend GP practices, or to raise concerns if they have any health concerns. There was a lot of transition to moving towards non-digital media, because we understand that not everyone is online, and so there have been physical campaigns as well. Radio Jackie is an example that we has been used by Southwest London Ccg to try and promote these messages. Next slide, please. So the other thing to mention is that there's a lot of support from the voluntary sector when it comes to cancer care. Community Links is a provider which has been great at helping promote cancer awareness, and particularly helping to get people to do their cancer screening tests. So just as a brief overview, of course, there's a bowel cancer screening test where you get a letter through the post. There's breast cancer screening. These are all targeted programs to try and identify cancer early. And so Community Links is a provider that we use in Merton and neighbouring boroughs to help promote that, especially promoting it in those sort of underprivileged areas, or patients who perhaps aren't as clued up or as connected to their practice, and so they have people who they have translators and are able to talk to people, call patients up and chase them for their screening. So hey, you haven't attended your screening test, please can you attend? This is where you can attend, and give information in their own language. And that extends across different groups, including LGBTQ, people with learning disability. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I was just emphasizing, there's more than just the online campaign, because we got some feedback we have some lay members in our cancer group who are non-clinicians, who always provide feedback to us about how we can help, and they really emphasize the fact that there is a proportion of society who don't have access to online material, and so there has been a significant investment in actual physical adverts, bus stands and so on. Next slide, please. So again, I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail unless anyone from the audience wants to ask any specific questions. But when it comes to prostate and bladder cancer, there's been a lot of work with general practice, a lot of webinars, trying to emphasize sort of going back to doing basic tests that we can do now the pandemic is a little bit more settled. When it comes to breast cancer, RMP, which is a big cancer coordination hub across the borough, have modified breast cancer services to allow it to be more fluid, more flexible, allow people to have a walk-in appointment rather than having set times and missing appointments. They've had open invitations, so that's been working quite well in some areas to try and improve the outreach. And there's also been a lot of work on trying to improve cervical screening for cervical cancer. A lot of money has been put aside to allow later opening in practices, so that people, women can come in for their cervical screening program in the evenings or the weekends. Next slide, please. We've also, this is actually Stephen, who's on the line, has helped create this. There's been a lot of public engagement events. This is a really rough estimate of what we've been doing, and is involving Merton, Kingston, all sorts of other boroughs. But we've had a lot of face-to-face contact with people now, which is great, which is what we really enjoy. In Merton specifically, there was a big event in East Merton, which involved the GP Centre, the CCG, the Cancer Leads, Macmillan, being there on the ground at a sort of a family fun day with leaflets, and it went really well. We've got another event planned in North Merton, where some of the practices are helping set up a cancer awareness day as well on that. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of the East Merton event. East Merton's a particular area with focus because East Merton compared to West Merton probably has a more deprived population and there's a bigger wealth gap. So there's been a lot of emphasis of trying to help that side of the borough, primarily before other parts of the borough. And so that was us at one of our events. Next slide, please. And that's the next event we've got in North Merton. We don't have the full details yet, but that's planned in November. And we're also open to attending other events. So I guess this is an example of a community event where we're trying to spread awareness, but also we're really open to anything else, any sort of family days, any sort of even if it's smaller groups, that's okay. We have representatives that could come down and talk about cancer awareness. Next slide, please. So I will go over this slide. It's probably slightly too technical, but no, next slide, please. So I just wanted to have a brief conversation about primary care networks. I'm not sure how you're aware, but GP practices have gone through a massive shift in the last 2 to 3 years, with practices getting together to form these networks, working together, trying to help each other. And a lot of the key cancer strategies have been implemented through primary care networks. Next slide, please. So essentially the NHS long-term plan is to try and identify cancer early, and it's cross-organizational work, but primary care networks, groups of GP practices have been tasked to try and help with that. And if we go to the next slide, please. The general outline involves trying to review our referral practice, clinicians on the ground looking at what they've done, trying to streamline processes, improving screening programs to identify cancer early, but also establishing a community of practice between different practices, but also the community to help engage and include. Next slide, please. So yeah, that's my slides done. I'm more than happy to have a general conversation if anyone has anything specific that they wanted to sort of discuss or bring up.
Dr. Alge, thanks so much for that, and the important, really, really important work you do for the community. So thank you very much. I have had one question come through so far. So just to remind other residents and councillors, if you have questions, comments for Dr. Alge, please send them to me now. Doctor, one question that's come through: how can councillors and residents associations help spread the word?
Well, I mean, absolutely making contact. Actually, and I'm the representative for Merton, so I'm happy to sort of leave my details. If there is an event that you feel you could have us with a stall, even if it's something very basic with leaflets, and just have a presence, we're happy to know about that. We want to know about that because that's our priority at attending these events. So I really, want people to sort of keep a lookout for places where it's appropriate for us to come and join and have representation. It's important that we continue to spread the message about cancer awareness, and little knowledge can help. So it's important that we continue to, even just sort of on a local level, just continue to emphasize that services are open, despite some newspapers suggesting that GP practices are closed. They're not. We're open, we're busy, we're seeing patients, and we want to see you if you've got a worrying symptom. Yes, you may have a telephone call initially, but if we're worried about you, most practices will see patients and, of course, test them and investigate them as they would have done before the pandemic. It may be slightly different in the way that we do it. It may be virtual first and then physical, but we are open. So that message is really key to spread.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question? How, in terms of cancer in particular, how long do you think, and it may be that you can't tell, but how long do you think it will be before your role or the what you have told us this evening will return to pre-pandemic status?
That's a really good question, James. So we've divided it by cancers, and we've seen that some cancers have come back to pre-pandemic levels, or identification of cancers. So cervical cancer and cervical screening has gone back to normal. We know that urological cancers are catching up. Breast cancers, the impression is that it may take another 6 months before we get the screening back up to what it was. So every cancer pathway has got a different target, but there is a lot of work on it, and a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on it. So yeah, I mean, I think the focus now is lung cancer and breast cancer. That's probably the two biggest at the moment, from what the data we have. But there's multiple projects going on in different ways to tackle this. So we're hoping that probably the 6-month timeline is for most of these programs should, unless, of course, with the pandemic, things can change very quickly. If there's a winter that changes things, we could end up falling behind. But the impression is in the next 6 months, we should hopefully catch up with most things.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't have any more questions or comments. I'm not surprised because you did in your report cover both the issues and progress to solving them. So I'm not surprised about that. In particular, I just want to emphasize your message, which is that GP practices are open, and that you're encouraging all of us to use our GP as and when we feel the need to. And I think there has been confusion around that. So thank you for confirming that or pushing that message. So Dr. Navdeep Auj, thank you again so much for coming to see us. And if you're tasked with that representative role, then I hope that we will see you again at some point in the future. But thank you so much for your briefing this evening and your report to us. You're very welcome, and your colleague Stephen as well, for the support he's given. You're both very welcome to stay, but we do understand that you will have other commitments. So we're also happy to bid you good night. But if you would wish to stay, you're of course both very welcome. But thank you so much for your contribution. So moving along, the final agenda item this evening, it is quite a short meeting, I'm afraid. The final agenda item is the open forum. The opportunity, we have called it the soapbox in the past, the opportunity for residents to raise with councillors any questions or comments or ideas. So it's not only questions, it's also ideas that you would like the council to consider. We have had some in advance, and I'm going to ask them first, and then after that, anybody else who wants to speak, any other resident who wants to speak and raise a question or comment or an idea on something you've heard this evening from Councillor Stringer or Dr. Auj, or indeed something completely different to this evening. So in terms of those who've indicated they would like to speak, in no particular order, I've got three. Regina Denton, and you had a question or comment or idea on Dundonald Park. So would you like to put that now? If you are here, you are here.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, James. Yes, Councillor. Yes, I have already asked Councillor Elena Stringer, if it's possible to look at the playground, actually, because it with 2 primary schools and a lot of nurseries around. I mean, the area is really very family orientated, so the playground does get a lot of use, and it does need probably a bit of updating and improvement. But I mean, I've also been having a constant look at the bin situation in Dundonald Rec, and there have been some improvements, but there are 2. one just outside the playground and one inside the playground. And I'm just honestly, I don't understand why these bins are there, because the foxes do get to the bins, and you know, there's always a mess there in the morning. And I find, because our children, well, mine are grown up now, but the children see this, they have to go through this, and they go to school and go past this rubbish stuff. I just find it's, you know, not very healthy for them. So I do hope that something can be done about the bin situation in Dundonald Park. That would be really great.
Regina, thank you. I don't, Eleanor, I don't know whether you have a comment. If you do, don't worry if you don't, but if you do, just before you do, Dr. Alger, I've looked ahead, which I should have done. It's so kind of you to stay with us. The next question is marked health services. So if you're able to stay with us for a couple of minutes, you will probably know the answer, but thank you. Eleanor, do you have a comment on what's been raised by Regina?
That's an absolutely classic example of, you know, more and more people are using our parks. And there's ongoing debates about, you know, what is the best way to use bins? Is it to have them there? But then, like you say, then they get full and then foxes come into them. So sometimes we remove them because of complaints of those issues, or move them slightly further away. And then people say, oh, well, if you've done my bin, we've moved it. But I'm really happy to look into that individual situation. But yeah, the key message we need to get across to people is, if your bin is full, don't keep shoving stuff in it, because then that just makes it easier for it to get ripped up, and definitely don't leave stuff either side. I think sometimes residents think they're doing the right thing. They've had a bit of a picnic in the park, so they leave it next to the bin because at least that's close. But actually it just leads to litter, so we just need to get that message across. But happy to pick up with you separately, Regina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Regina, for your question. And there's no requirement, obviously, to request questions in advance, but it is helpful. And next, I've got Sandra Ash. And Sandra, you had a question or comment or idea, and it's marked for me as just health services.
Hello. Yes, Sandra Ash here. I'm a member of the Keep Our St Helier Hospital campaign, but I'm speaking tonight more as an individual than a member. There's a couple of things that I'd like to draw to people's attention. One, very briefly, because it's a national rather than a local problem, and that's the new Health and Social Care Bill currently going through Parliament. I think councillors, and in particular MPs, need to be aware of the implications of that act. An example is the fact that the ICS boards that are being established now will have the power to arrange to contract for hospital services, but this new bill removes their duty, the statutory duty, to actually provide hospital services. And that's an amazingly scary proposition, as these ICS boards will be the main contractors of our health services, but they won't have an obligation to provide us with hospital services. There's no duty for the provision of A&Es and ambulance services, or that they will be available to everybody in a given ICS area. And our particular ICS, which will take over from the clinical commissioning groups, is going to be serving 1.5 million people, but they will have no duty to provide any of us with hospital care. If any of the councillors or MPs related to this meeting want any more details, they could actually email info@cosh.org, and we would send them some of the details of the implications of this act. But mainly what we're asking you to do is to oppose this act and use all your powers to stop this very destructive act going through, because we believe it could be the end of the NHS. But what I want to talk about as well is the local health services and the plans to downgrade Epsom and St Helier hospitals. The plan that was consulted on back in March 2020 was to remove A&E, maternity, intensive care, children's inpatient care, emergency medicine, emergency surgery, coronary care, cancer care and renal care from Epsom and St Helier. It was to cut over 500 beds from our area's health services, and in the place of those services to build a single, much smaller, more remote unit. The plan said on the Sutton Hospital site, And that was consulted on, and it went forward, and the board, the trust rather, were awarded £511 million to implement their plans. In the meantime, however, those plans have changed so substantially that I think that means that any consultation that happened, and it happened over the lockdown period, so I would say that it was not so valid anyway, but there have been so many huge changes to the plans since then that I believe we ought to call for a new consultation, and preferably one that means keeping acute services at Epsom and St Helier hospitals, the two hospitals that serve so well the communities they were built in. What's happened in the meantime to change it? Well, for instance, the Trust Board have written to the government and said that the £511 million they were awarded is not enough money for them to carry out their plan. They said that they were the lessons of COVID taught them that they have to add more beds. Well, they intend to add 10 more beds. Don't think they've learned their lessons from COVID when they intend to cut 500 general acute beds from the local area. They intend to not have the 50% of beds that they were said were going to be single or private rooms. They now intend to have 72% of the beds in single or private rooms. They want the building to be much taller, and the look of the design that they're now talking about is entirely different from that consulted on. They are intending to sell it's now emerged, about half of the land at Epsom and St Helier. And if the previous sale that went on at Epsom is anything to go by, it'll be at knockdown prices to property developers building luxury accommodation. It's emerged that the car park they intend to provide there will have 800 spaces. 400 of those spaces are allocated to the Marsden. The other 400 have to be shared between all other site users, and that includes the patients and staff for this new acute facility, the school that's on the same site, and the proposed massive cancer hub, which was originally touted as providing thousands of jobs. And yet all those people have got to share just 400 car parking spaces with 400 already allocated to the Marsden. They've now decided also that the highly regarded renal services that had been provided at St Helier, it was one of the major regional renal services, they've decided they're not going to take that with them to this new acute unit. Instead, they're going to give it to the St George's Hospital. And that's going to cost £80 million. And having spent all that money, it will have even less renal beds than we've got now between Epsom, St Helier and St George's. In the space that had been allocated for renal services in this new smaller unit to replace all of our acute care, now they've decided they're going to give it to St George's. They're going to put on that whole floor operating facilities for the Royal Marsden. Now, during the consultation, they absolutely insisted that this was not an acute unit built as part of the Marsden. It wasn't even on the Marsden site. They insisted it was on the Sutton site, would not be part of the Marsden. Now, here we are, a whole floor of it is being given over to the Marsden. Other changes. And they also say that services will be merged. They will share share services between the Marsden and this unit being built to replace Epsom and St Helier acute services. So there's a blurring of who is responsible for this new unit, who will own the budget, who will own it. In the meantime, also, Epsom and St Helier decided to share the chairmanship of their board with the existing chair of St George's. And on the resignation of Daniel Elkeles, the chief executive of Epsom and St Helier, it was decided without any consultation that the chief executive of St George's would also become the chief executive of Epsom and St Helier Hospital, and that they would work together as a group. Now, some of you will remember that when Epsom and St Helier were merged, we were told they would remain as two separate hospitals. But as time went on, the chief executive, Daniel Elkerley, started referring to them as one hospital on 2 sites. I think we're in severe danger of Epsom St Helier Queen Mary's Hospital for Children being one hospital on the St George's site. This would be in line with the STP plan to have St George's as the only fixed point in southwest London. I think we're in danger of losing all of our hospital services, because all that they are saying now, it's become apparent, all that will be left at Epsom and St Helier will be nursing care beds with no overnight doctor. It will be just nursing care and some outpatients appointments, mostly done digitally, because this new act says digital first. And we are in severe danger that their funding, their income would be so severely reduced that they could easily both be decreed financially unviable and closed entirely.
Sandra, can I ask you, you're doing exactly what you should do. The whole point of this forum is to allow you as residents to say what you feel and how strongly you feel.
Yeah.
You've put a lot of detail in. It's going to be quite difficult to come back on all of this. Can I ask you to try to wrap up in the next sort of 30 seconds or so, because you've covered a lot of ground.
Okay, but there's very important ground to cover here, and it's being kept very quiet, because what has been given zero publicity.
Sandra, sorry, I'll just come back on that one point. With respect, it hasn't, because I've allowed you to speak for quite a few minutes, and you've gone into a lot of detail. So at this meeting, it's definitely not being kept quiet. All I'm saying is, in order to give people, perhaps councillors, the opportunity to respond to you, and I want to respond as well. Dr. Alge may or may not want to respond from a clinical perspective, but there'll be other questions and comments tonight on other matters. That's all I'm saying. So if you can just begin to wind up, that would be great.
Okay, well, a major factor that has not been given any publicity anywhere at all other than the Health Service Journal is that the government have quietly asked all the trusts in their lead 6 so-called new hospitals to actually submit plans for costing no more, and they had 2 weeks to do it in. They had to submit plans for their new builds to cost no more than 400 million. And remember that that Epsom and St Helier had originally been allocated 511 million. The trust had said in their business case that wasn't enough. The government have now told them they've got to submit plans costing no more than 400 million. Now, I submit that this means that consultation that was held has been superseded by so many changes, it must be declared null and void. And I'm asking all the councillors and any MPs that may be or may not be part of this to demand that we have a new consultation, and one that includes the cheaper, better health outcomes option of rebuilding, refurbishing, and if necessary, enlarging Epsom and St Helier, and to throw out these plans to remove all our acute services from the whole of our area.
Sandra, thank you. Thank you very much for what you've said. And you've put a lot of detail in, and I would just want to emphasize again, that's exactly what this forum exists for. In the interest of balance, I'm just going to pull out some of the things that you have said, because you're obviously very concerned about this, but you have also mentioned a number of times this figure of 511 million. You have talked, which is a huge amount of money, over £500 million. You've talked about the new services that are proposed, and you've referred yourself to a new hospital. So undoubtedly there are challenges.
Sorry.
You towards the end you use that phrase, but you may have been quoting others. But clearly there are challenges, and you feel very strongly. I just wanted to give a little bit of balance. But before Dr. Alge may or may not want to comment from a clinical perspective, he might wish that he'd left by now. But before that, are there any? And I only meant because it's a controversial subject. I didn't mean for any other reason. Are there any councillors, as it is councillors this has been addressed to, and we have been asked to raise this on Sandra's behalf? Are there any councillors who would like to respond to what has been said? Councillor Stringer.
Well, I'll just come in quickly. So thank you, Sandra. And so that we, as the administration of the council, have been fighting to keep St Helier fully open and to stop downgrading of the services. And similarly, we have some questions about that transfer of renal care. So this is something that we are using the powers that we have to try to influence. You asked if there are MPs here. I don't think there are. But yes, we as councillors and as the council do have some voice, and we are trying to use that to fight for the right healthcare.
Thank you. Other councillors' comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Just a couple of brief points. I think that the area that's covered by the Wimbledon Community Forum, very largely, people go to St George's or indeed to Kingston Hospital. So although Sandra has revealed her colours as on behalf of COSH, which is a campaigning organisation, she has an axe to grind. I'm not sure that it's quite as relevant to this forum as it might be to other parts of the borough. I think the other thing to say, and I've been a councillor for many years, indeed I was leader of the council from 2006 to 10, I've seen so many proposals to do something about St Helier Hospital and Epsom as well, for that matter. But the fact of the matter is that St Helier Hospital is older than the NHS. It is having currently millions and millions of pounds spent on it, but it is not an ideal place to centre critical care services. And we sometimes, I think, descend into talking about how far you might have to go a bit extra to go to a critical care hospital. Frankly, a friend of mine was taken in to St George's only yesterday from Worcester Park. Why from Worcester Park to St George's? Because he'd had a seizure. And we already have centres of excellence. And there's no difference with this plan than to what is already going on with the NHS.
Can I answer that?
Thank you. Sandra, I will let you come back in a moment. Can we just see if there are other comments? You have spoken very passionately about your own beliefs. I do, again, as chairing this, I do want to just make sure there's some balance because of what has been said tonight. One resident is assuming that St Helier Hospital is closing. Well, it's not, and it's never been proposed that it will. Councillor Gretton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just wanted to say that there's a new £500 million or £500 million hospital investment being built. It's going to be one of the best hospitals in the country. It's one of the country's new 5 or 6 main new hospitals. It's going to be brand new world-class A&E, brand new world-class maternity units, and this is the best news possible, I think, for the residents of Wimbledon. So residents of Wimbledon haven't been told as much about it so far because Merton Council, unfortunately, has tried to block this £500 million investment for a very long time. So it's just going to be fantastic news, I think, for the residents of Wimbledon. Also, the St Helier Hospital itself is going to have tens of millions of pounds pumped into it to make it a really new, modern district hospital. So for people who have to go to and from hospital quite regularly, it's going to be great news. And that's why every GP surgery in the entire borough of Merton, Mitcham, Wimbledon and everything, they all support this fantastic new investment for the residents of Wimbledon and Merton. Thank you.
Okay, I'm allowing these robust responses because Sandra, quite rightly, as you should, you have made a very robust case, and as this is a residents' meeting, I'm going to come to you to wrap up. As long as you're very, very brief, please. Dr. Auge, please don't feel any need to jump into the controversy, but if there's something you would like to say, then please do.
I'll be very brief. Of course, when it comes to bills and the details of bills, I'm not involved in that. I have worked at St Helier Hospital for now 5 to 6 years. I do work as a GP with an interest in geriatrics there 1 day a week, so I'm quite connected to St Helier Hospital. I mean, from my sort of perspective as a doctor in the hospital, I do think there is something to say about the fact that it is not a great site for critical care. I do agree with that comment from Councillor Williams. I think, and to get it to the level where you would have robust, critical care, it would be a lot. So, and so I was quite excited by the prospect of a Sutton hospital with services that would match St George's, because working a doctor working there sometimes can be a struggle. If your patient has a heart attack at St Helier, if it's a certain type of heart attack, you really wish they were at St George's, because they just don't have the cath lab, they don't have, and probably it'd be very difficult to implement that in the current site with how old it is. So I mean, that's just a perspective from a doctor on the wards there. But I'm not, I don't have any opinion on closing or not closing. It just, I think from a critical care perspective, there is a need, and I think Sutton Hospital excites me because I think the area needs an acute critical care hospital. That's all I guess I will say.
Thank you. Sandra, there are other people who want to speak on other matters, but my job is to be neutral, and it's only fair to give you that sort of 30 seconds to come back, but please do be very brief.
Okay, I'd like to say, first of all, I don't have an axe to grind. I don't work for anyone. I'm not employed by anyone. I'm a citizen who cares very much about healthcare to be provided to my children and my grandchildren. I have no other axe, no other influence. So I find it a bit offensive being told that I've got an axe to grind. And it's not that I have opinions. I go to the board meetings, I read the board papers, I go to the CCG meetings when I could. I keep myself as informed as I possibly can. What's being built in Sutton is not a hospital. It is an acute-only unit being totally merged with the Marsden. It is not going to be a standalone hospital. As soon as someone's had a few days' care there, according to the chief executive that's just left, they will be discharged from there within 2 or 3 days back to the district hospital that will have no overnight doctors. It is not a standalone hospital. All acute patients cannot go to St George's. St George's is not coping now. They're having to refer maternity cases and A&E cases to St Helier and Epsom on a regular basis. So they certainly couldn't cope with all the acute patients that currently go to our 2 local hospitals, and nor is there car parking space for them. So this is not just an opinion or a whim of mine. I spend a lot of time getting myself informed, and the reason I'm telling you now in such an impassioned way is because I care about the health of my children, my grandchildren, and your children and your grandchildren. And I think we need to keep acute services at Epsom and St Helier, where the only reason they are not fit for purpose now is because nobody's done the maintenance for 15 years, because their future has always been put in doubt by the repeated plans to close or downgrade Epsom and St Helier hospitals. And the long-term plan is clearly to only have St George's Hospital in southwest London, and that will impact on all of us and be a danger to all of us.
I'm going to ask you to stop, because the purpose was for you to respond to some of what you've heard, but I feel you're also carrying on with your argument. I would like to commend you for your passion and your commitment, and all residents should feel impassioned about things, and I hope you do have an axe to grind, if I can put it that way, because we should all have an axe to grind. I think the comment was not meant as a criticism. It was more meant to say that as you are a member of a pressure group that has a particular view, clearly you're going to express those views, and you have, and I'm glad you have, and other people this evening have given the counter view, and that's what this is about. This is an opportunity for you to address those who are elected representatives, and you've done it, and I'm grateful for that. So I'm going to move on. We have Nicola Davenport, who's joining us, but Nicola is on YouTube. So the question is about the trust forward issue, but I believe, Elena, you answered that earlier, didn't you? I think, did you not address trust?
I didn't. I answered it, James, that I didn't answer it. I said I know there's been a development, but I'm not up to date with the exact details.
Sorry.
So I don't want to mislead.
No, thank you. I mean, it's not your responsibility. It was only if you could help us. Is anybody else present who's able to help us with this question? In that case, Nicola, I'm sorry that we can't help you on that one, but what will happen, as I've said before, is that Chris will kindly follow it up for us, and he will report back both to you, but also to all other residents in the normal way. So those are the 3 questions that I knew about in advance. Are there any other questions or comments? And if you could put it into the group chat, are there any other questions or comments or ideas? We've got one member of the cabinet here and quite a few councillors. So now is the opportunity for questions, comments or ideas to councillors. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that it's disappointing that we're on Zoom and YouTube because it does hamper us. It's not the way that it was before. We really had some exciting debates when we were all able to get together, and sometimes there were 20, 25 residents. I suspect the football may not be helping this evening, but nevertheless, it is a shame that we're such a small group this evening. I'm very grateful to Councillor Stringer and to Dr. Auge for their time and addressing us this evening. I think I'm obviously seeing if comments are coming through or questions are coming through while I'm talking, but there are still none. So I think we probably will wrap up now this evening. I'm very grateful to you all. I hope that we're going to be able to get together in December, and if not, then we think we definitely will for our spring meeting. Those of you who have come tonight, please do stay engaged. Please do still keep making your arguments, holding councillors to account, writing to us and giving your ideas and asking your questions. I really am a firm believer in the forum and the opportunity for residents to participate in your own local government. So thank you all who've attended this evening. I wish you a good rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you all in December. So thank you very much and good night.